1-1. You're here seeking a commutation of your sentence. You were sentenced in October 2002 in East Baton Rouge Parish to a life sentence for second-degree murder conviction. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Is Ms. Marbella on the line yet? Yes. Ms. Marbella, I wanted to put on the record that I did, in fact, didn't realize it until I read the file over the weekend. I did, in fact, represent a co-defendant in this case, DJ Reentry, who was, I believe, the witness at trial. I did want to put that on the record. I am fully prepared to be fair and honest in this case, but I do want to put that on the record. And you may think, or either side may think, that I should refuse myself.
Judge Marbella, I have no problems with you serving on this board whatsoever for this particular case. So thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you. Clerk, do you have any concerns about that?
I don't.
I'm sorry, Mr. Marabella, we have no concerns. We're aware of any previous involvement you may have had, and I echo Ms. Barbera's sentiments that, you know, I think that there's no issue with you being involved in this case.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mr. Cameron, how old are you now?
45 years old, sir.
And how long have you been in prison?
Almost 21 years, sir.
Mr. Cameron, I am familiar with facts, as you probably know, but for the board, I want you to explain as best you can what happened that particular night.
Okay. On the night of July 10th, 1998, me and a group of friends of mine went out to a club downtown called Traditions. I'm sorry, I'm a little anxious. Okay. After we got there, I heard that somebody had a knife on a dance floor. So I went up by a DJ booth so I could get a better view of what was going on. And that's when I seen Mr. Thorne with a knife in his hand. He happened to swing it at a friend of mine next to him, Frank, and Frank bent over like he had gotten stabbed. I ran down and checked on Frank, but I couldn't get to him. I seen Mr. Thorne running toward the rear exit. So I chased him. I caught up to him about 2 blocks down the road. When I came around the corner, he was facing me with a knife. And I happened to still had a beer bottle in my hand. So I threw it to try to knock the knife loose. But I missed, but it caused him to drop the knife down by his side, and I tackled him. And as I was getting up off the ground, I noticed his knife on the right side. And I did the worst thing possible I could ever do in that moment. I grabbed it and I stabbed him. And then I'm ashamed of what I did. I'm ashamed of the pain I've caused by my actions that night.
A little bit, Mr. Cameron, about who you were back then on that particular night. How old were you?
I had just turned 21, sir.
And how far had you gone to school?
I was 2.5 years of college, Southeastern Louisiana.
You were in a bar. I assume you were drinking?
Yes, sir, I was.
What were y'all drinking that night, or what were you drinking that night?
Beer. I had a few beers.
How about drugs?
No, sir, not that night.
Had you ever used drugs before?
Unfortunately, sir, I have.
Let's talk about your drug use. When did you start using drugs?
Maybe at 18 when I graduated and went to college and started attending them bars. I really never. Excuse me,
what kind of drugs start using?
I smoked some weed. I did X pills before, and Xanax. I did Xanax before.
How often were you using drugs and drinking during this time?
I was drinking regular, but at this time I didn't do many drugs.
Now, you got arrested, you bonded out, right?
Yes, sir.
Tell me what was going on with you during this time. Because you got a DWI while you were out on
Yes, sir.
bond
Yes,
for
sir.
murder.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so tell me what happened back then, what was going on?
I pretty much, I quit going out at that time. When I was on bond, I didn't attend bars much anymore, but I did get involved, in drinking. I still end up drinking because I was stressed out and I was having a hard time coping with my situation. And unfortunately, I turned to drinking a little more than I was used to.
You actually went to trial. I think you waived the jury and the judge found you guilty. The report seems to suggest it was a jury, but it was a waived jury, right? Judge Johnson, I believe, was your judge. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I waived the jury and went with Judge Johnson. Yes, sir.
So let's talk about what you've done since you've gone to prison. Tell me, let's first start out with education. What sort of education have you gotten while you've been in prison?
When I was blessed with the opportunity to be a reentry mentor, they put me at the Collision Repair Center, and I've taken full advantage of all the education available there. I've become master's certified. I have about 40 I-CAR certifications that are required in the collision repair field, and I have about 10 plus Toyota certifications.
Tell me what your role was in the reentry program. You said you were a mentor. What did you do in the reentry program?
Well, I'm at the Collision Repair Center. It's my job to teach my students the book knowledge they need to pass their 2 ASC certifications that they need, and give them the hands-on knowledge that they need to go home and be successful and get a job and to keep a job and not turn back to their previous lives of crime.
You currently still working with the reentry program?
Yes, sir. I've been working there over 12 years. Yes, sir.
Judge Burris wrote a letter on your behalf.
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about what you've done in terms of substance. What programs have you taken that have given you some direction or some understanding of substance abuse, whether it be ecstasy, pills you were taking, alcohol? What, if anything, have you done while you've been in prison dealing with substance abuse?
Well, I've taken Living in Balance and really gave me the blueprint to which I live my life. I've been sober since I've been here for 21 years. I work out regularly. I eat healthy, and I'm gonna continue on that life of sobriety. And I've taken AA recently. When I got granted the application to come before y'all, I went and joined AA because I know that's something I want to pursue when I go home.
Let me ask you this. When you were bonded out and you got the DWI, how often were you drinking?
Probably once or twice a week at that time on the weekends.
Tell me about your sobriety plan. If you get an opportunity to get a favorable vote here today and ultimately release, tell me how you're gonna convince me and the rest of this board that you're not going to go back to drinking. You're not going to go back to taking it.
Right.
When you do that, you end up doing crazy things.
Right. I understand. I'm blessed with a wonderful support system when I go home. And I have a good foundation.
Tell me about your support system. What is it? What's your wonderful?
My wonderful wife, Jennifer, behind me, who doesn't drink. My 2 stepsons, Alan and Sean, which they're sober, and my family, John and Patricia, my mom and dad.
You had your mom and dad before, and you probably had a lot of people in your family that didn't drink or didn't abuse it or alcohol. You had that back then. What do you have now today that's different? What are you going to do? I mean, you got a good support system, that's wonderful. But what else are you going to do positive to make sure you don't go back to drinking or doing drugs?
Well, I'm better equipped with better decision-making skills through the class I had up here, like 100 hours and thinking for a change. I'm better equipped to making good decisions and putting myself in good places. You know, I was on the street, I was lacking that. That's why I was going to bars and I was putting myself in bad places. I wasn't recognizing risk like I do now in my decision-making process now.
What are some tricks that would get you back to drinking and maybe doing drugs? Do you know what your triggers are or some of your triggers?
Well, some of my triggers was really reflecting on my past, my triggers were the bar scenes and hanging out with friends, going to putting myself in those type of negative environments. Reflecting on that, I realized how foolish that was. I should have been a responsible man. I should have been home doing my college work instead of out partying with my friends all the time. I'm ashamed of my behavior at that time.
Do you consider yourself an alcoholic?
Yeah, up here reflecting on that time, I most certainly consider myself an alcoholic.
Do you think you're able to even go out and have the first drink?
No, sir. I'm never going to drink again.
Where are you going to be living at it? You were ultimately going to get out.
Well, if I get out, first I'm going to go to the Pro Project and go through their extensive thing. And then I'm going to go live with my wife in Baton Rouge, East Baton Rouge.
South Baton Rouge is South Louisiana. Drinking is just a way of life. People are gonna, push a beer on you, a drink here, a drink there. Tell me how you're gonna be able to make sure, convince me that you're not gonna fall for that. You're gonna be able to be strong enough to be able to resist
that. Well, I've been sober, 21 years here, and there is temptation around here at times, and I'm equipped with the good decision-making skills to know to resist that. I think about the, consequence of my actions, the effect they have on other people, like what brought me here today, and I'm ashamed of myself. And
talked about AA and something that you will consider doing. Tell me where you think AA fits in your life.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat it, please?
Yes, you discussed AA. You said when you found out you were coming for the board, you took some AA classes. So tell me where AA fits into your sobriety.
Well, I think AA, as a group, it'll give me people to talk to. I can get a sponsor that I can communicate with, on a regular basis. If I'm ever tempted, if somebody is like a network where I'll be able to talk to people about it.
What is moving? Tell me when did you take moving from a life of addiction to a life of recovery? When did you take that?
I think that was 2006, sir.
Tell me what you learned in that book. How was that?
It told you how to recognize risk and hang around with positive people and don't put yourself in bad situations. And like I said earlier, it gave me the blueprint to which I live my life. I work out regularly, I eat healthy, and I stay completely sober.
Disciplinary record. I think you've had 5 write-ups. Is that right? The time you've been here?
Yes, sir. 5 write-ups. Yes, sir.
Last was in 2011. What was that about?
That was a burned DVD.
Have you taken anything involving victim awareness or anything in that regard while you've been in prison?
I was in victim awareness to the coronavirus it came, and they shut everything down. And then before it came back, I was doing the victim dialogue program with Miss Thorne when everything opened back up. So I decided not to get back in there because I was dealing directly with her at that point.
Since you've been in prison, what have you reflected upon Chad Cameron inside about what it is you caused to the Thorne family?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again, please?
Yes. What effect do you think your killing their son has had on that family?
Oh, I couldn't even begin to imagine. I mean, actually, I know of, a few things, but I couldn't even begin to imagine how hurtful this has been on the Thorne family. I know, how devastating this was to my family, and I couldn't even begin to imagine, how terrible these last 24 years have been for Miss Thorne and her family.
How long have you been a trustee?
I think 12 years, sir.
What can you tell us about Mr. Cameron?
He has, in fact, been in the Reentry Mentor Program since the beginning of 2011, and has continue to work in that capacity. He's benefited a lot of guys coming through, showing them not only the trade as well as giving them rather the tools that they need to get out. And like you said, we've seen a lot of good work with Chad with this reentry program, and it's benefited him as well as those offenders that have gone through it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marabella. At this time, we'd like to hear from Mr. Myers with the parole project.
Yes, good afternoon. Kerry Myers, Louisiana Parole Project. Parole Project is prepared to work with Mr. Cameron upon his release. We'll assign him a reentry specialist who will work with him on a daily basis while he's going through his intensive reintegration. That mentorship includes the reentry specialist ability to address any problems that he might have, questions, help him in his transition. We know that 21 years in prison is a long time, and the world has changed. We will also provide Mr. Cameron with the services that he needs to connect him to his basic services. Also, he'll be taking classes for at least the first 4 to 5 weeks minimum in things like financial planning and literacy, technology, social norms, understanding the world and how it's changed socially, social interaction, job placement programming, workplace protocols. He will have the benefit of the entire parole project. He also has an excellent, as he said earlier, support system. We know that we have the ability and we will connect him. I understand that he already has reached out through the church that his wife attends, who has AANA meetings, but we also prepared to assist him with that, connecting him to any services if that becomes an issue. Mr. Cameron's record, his contributions to the community there at Angola, his work as a mentor has been outstanding. He's contributed to making the lives of many people better over the last 11 years. And we just want to say that we support Mr. Cameron fully and hope this board will grant him his recommendation today.
First, they have a question before we move on. Question?
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Cameron. How are you?
Doing fine. How are you today, sir?
Mr. Cameron, I just want to revisit briefly. You said that you went to a nightclub, I think it was the Evolution, and you went up to the disc jockey spot so you were told somebody had a knife on the floor. And you thought your friend was bent over and had been stabbed.
Yes, sir.
And you spotted the person with the knife, and he ran out of the club, and you pursued him for 2 blocks. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You actually pursued this individual, and then you had an altercation, and then you stabbed him. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you also mentioned something about victim dialogue. Did you ever finish that process? Did you go all the way through the dialogue process with the victim?
No, sir, I have not, unfortunately.
Tell me why not.
I'm not quite sure. We were supposed to meet last week. I'm not quite sure what happened.
Now, last question. Took the life of a human being. You stabbed the person to death. Do you think 21 years of incarceration is sufficient retribution for taking a life of a human being?
There's no amount of time that I could do to make up for the loss of a life and the effects it's had on the Thorne family. I'm just here humbly throwing myself at the mercy of this honorable board.
So that's my question. Do you think 21 years is sufficient?
No, sir, I don't believe in any amount of time, no, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll hear from the folks who are there with you. First, we'd like to hear from your wife, Mrs. King.
I can stay here.
Yes, go ahead, stand up there, right there. That's fine. That's perfect.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I've been through in front of this board several times as an attorney now, and today I get to come before you as a wife. I believe Chad's packet speaks for itself, but I would like to tell you about the man that I know, the man that when the 2016 floods hit, did everything he possibly could to help his families. His parents and I live just a few streets apart. We both lost our whole houses. Chad built furniture in here to make sure that we didn't have to do anything. This man takes his role as a reentry mentor to heart. He actually gets personally affronted when the guys don't pass their tests. He goes out of his way on a daily basis to make sure that they have the information that they need. During COVID, one of the juvenile lifers in his dorm was preparing to take his GED, and Chad spent every day helping him review the math. He's selfless. When he would come back from the victim dialogue conversations over this past year, he would literally be upset for 3 to 4 days, just reflecting on what happened, the decisions he made. He has contemplated and regretted that night every day for 24 years. There's no doubt in my mind that that is something that Chad wakes up with and goes to sleep with, because we have discussions about it. As far as the alcohol issue, I have already been active in the program at my church as an Al-Anon participant, because the boys and I, unfortunately, my first husband was an alcoholic. Chad and I have had multiple conversations about that impact on both my life and the boys' lives, and it has assisted him in figuring out exactly how bad things had gotten, because although he didn't drink consistently or every day, he did drink to excess. So we have extensive conversations about those things as well. I get comments from wardens. I get people that stop by the visiting table telling me how great a person he is, how much of an impact he makes up here. But I think it's most evident in the fact that his reentry mentees that go home consistently reach out to me to make sure that I'm okay. When the hurricane was coming last year, I got messages from the guys that Chad has helped to go home, making sure that I knew that if something happened to my house, they were going to be there to help me, to give back to me, because they owe Chad so much. And I think that that needs to be considered. We have an amazing family waiting for him at home. He has the backing of the firm that I'm a part of. We are all family, and we will make sure that his reentry is as smooth as possible. I also have mental health resources already set up. My amazing employers make sure that because of the work that I do with post-conviction, that I have good mental health resources that I partake of. And I've actually already discussed with my counselor what other counselors in her group of counselors could assist Chad if that becomes an issue, if he needs somebody to talk to, which we're basically thinking will probably happen. They do have some counselors that work with people who have reentered society from prison for long, extensive time. So I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have, but I just humbly ask that y'all consider all that Chad has done to become a better person and change who he is, and allow him a chance to come home.
I believe Mrs. Patricia Cameron wants to say something. That's mother.
Almost. Hello, my name is Patricia Cameron. I'm Chad's mother and I'm here with his father. I have tried to write a letter to explain how I feel about him, but it's hard. First of all, I'd like to say that the adjectives to describe him are, he has a heart of gold. He is compassionate, he's loving, he's kind, he's respectful, he's generous to a fault, and he's my best friend. He's an incredible listener, and he's always been there to listen to me and to his friends. Through the years, he has done the kindest things that have never gone unnoticed. One day when my aunt passed away and I started to cry, I called my sister to talk to her and she wasn't home. He asked me what was wrong with me, and I said I needed to talk on the phone. So he said, Mommy, I'll go to the bedroom and talk to you. He was 8. You can't teach that. Years later, he had a friend call that wanted to go to her senior prom, and her boyfriend had broke up with her the day before. He had plans to go to a crawfish boil with his friends, and he dropped them to take her to the prom. To me, that was a sign of character. Chad has missed so much over the years. He's missed weddings, birthdays, holidays, the birth of his nephew, the death of family members. But during the hardest time, he's the one that calls with words of encouragement. I think that some people would harden with a life sentence. They lose hope and faith, but not Chad. He has never lost hope and never doubted his faith. Unlike me, the level of remorse and regret he feels is profound. He has cried to us over the years so many times. He has cried about the pain he's caused the victim's family and the regret that he has put us through this also. We all lost that day. Chad is loved immensely and has an incredible amount of supporters. We are begging you, please set him free and send him home to us. He deserves a second chance. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to hear from the DA's office, Ms. Barbera.
Thank you, Ms. Renazzo. Mr. Roche took some of the notes straight off of the piece of paper in front of me. The fact that this was a pursuit, this fight, this disagreement, this encounter was over when Christopher Thorne ran away, and he was pursued by a group of individuals, and it was in fact Chad Cameron who stabbed him to death. Christopher was only 27 years old, and Chad Cameron has only served 21 years. And I just honestly do not think that's enough. Do I think that at some point in the future, Chad Cameron will be released on parole from the Department of Corrections? I do. I just don't think that now is the time. And I will readily acknowledge he's done some amazing things in the Department of Corrections, and we certainly do need inmates like him to guide and lead others in the right direction that are about to be released back into society. Our office is still litigating post-conviction matters in this case. This is not something that has been closed for 21 years. It has been alive and well in our office. I do struggle with the fact that Chad Cameron is standing or sitting here before you this afternoon, accepting complete responsibility for what he did, when in fact our office has had to litigate against accusations of prosecutorial misconduct, collusion, several things that as prosecutors are very difficult for us to deal with. But this is not about my office. This is about Christopher Thorne's family and the suffering that they have endured. Obviously, the Cameron family has endured as well a great deal of suffering. And as his mom said, 2 families their lives were changed forever on that day. I'll just go back to where I started and say that I just don't think, based upon the facts of this case, that 21 years is enough. And I would respectfully ask that you do not recommend any commutation to the governor in this matter today. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cameron, before we turn it over to your attorney, Ms. Burke, is there anything you'd like to say to us?
Yes, ma'am, there is. This is from my heart, but I knew I was gonna be emotional today, so I wrote it down, if you don't mind, ma'am. Words can't even begin to describe how terrible I feel for what I've done. For the first decade here, I would literally wake up and think that what I had done was only a dream. Over the years, that sensation has faded, but my regret and remorse for what I have done will never fade, nor should it. What gets me through most of the time when I'm feeling sorry for myself or having difficulties here is the fact that I know I deserve it. I've done the ultimate wrong and deserve to be miserable for it. It pains me to think about the precious moments that I have deprived the Thorne family of and what they've had to endure these past 24 years without Chris in their lives. I know firsthand the catastrophic impact that my actions have had on my family and couldn't even begin to imagine what this has done to theirs. I remember Chris's aunt saying at trial that my parents still get to see me and hug me, but that Chris's parents will never have the opportunity. The truthfulness of those words have never been far from my mind. Parents should never have to go through what I have put them through, and I'm ashamed of myself at having been the cause of it. I tear up every time I think about them going to Chris's gravesite for his birthday, because I can envision my parents doing the same thing for me if I were not here. I would give anything to be able to go back to that night and give back what I've taken from them. Sadly, I cannot. I can only convey my deepest remorse and regret for what I've done and pray that in some way they benefit from knowing that.
Thank you, sir. Ms.
Thank you,
Burke?
ma'am.
Thank you so much, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of Mr. Cameron. I have a couple of notes prepared just because I knew that I would be a little nervous. Jennifer Cameron is an associate attorney at my office. Chad Cameron is her husband. I've known him as both a client and sort of a little bit as family. So today is one of the honors of my career, and also it's a little bit of a terrifying moment for me today. Nothing that I say today in support of Mr. Cameron can take away from what happened in July 1998, the devastation that Mr. Cameron has acknowledged that his past actions have caused to the Thorne family. A lot of the letters that were put in the packet, in the petition, state that he's acknowledged his responsibility. He's acknowledged his remorse to just about anyone that will listen to him, it sounds like. Chad Cameron will spend his entire lifetime making up for what he did in July 1998. As he acknowledged to you, Mr. Roche, there isn't enough time to make up for that night. There's not enough time. But if the past 20 years of his incarceration are any indication, we can surmise that the rest of Chad's life will be dedicated to service, both to others and service of his own self-transformation. In the past 20 years, Mr. Cameron has become a master collision repair technician. He's become a certified CTE tutor. He's completed NCCER, and he has taken classes to demonstrate his commitment to a better way of living. I know, Mr. Marabella, you had a lot of questions about what his level of understanding was of mental health and how it connected to alcoholism. Chad and I, and Chad, Jennifer and I have had several conversations about whether or not Chad understands that he struggles with alcoholism. I think that my impression here, as kind of an armchair psychologist, is that when Chad was incarcerated, we're talking early 2000s, mental health was not as understood, appreciated, and cared for as it was today. And the idea that alcoholism is a mental health problem is perhaps something that Chad is going to struggle with daily, but we've talked about it, he understands it, and we have in place a very robust plan to help him reintegrate. I know that you, Mr. Marabella, were asking what his plan was. He's going to be going to AA every week at the Vineyard with Jennifer. Some of those classes that he's taken to demonstrating his commitment to a better way of living, a Tyra leadership, 100 hours, anger management, living in balance, therapeutic community training, 12 steps, and healing group. All of those he has discussed with me, have given him the basis for what he knows about how to live a balanced life. They're going to prepare him to be a person that, if his board deems it's appropriate, can live out in society and be prepared to face those challenges that he knows he's going to face each and every day. And I know that Jennifer mentioned this very briefly, but as Chad is a client of our firm, we have a client advocate on staff that is prepared to assist Chad with each and every one of his needs when it comes to reentry, providing him what, I know that Pearl Project has this as well, but providing him with whatever he may need in terms of, hopefully inpatient treatment is not needed, but mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment. Chad will not want for anything when it comes to some of those needs that we discussed that may have driven him to the actions that have unfortunately brought us all here today back in 1998. Over the past 20 years, Chad has been known by many different names and titles. He's been a defendant. He's been known by his DOC number. He's been a dad to Jennifer's sons. He's been a son, a husband. He's been a motivator, a mentor, and soon he will be a grandfather. The individuals in the letters of support for Chad spoke about him more eloquently than I could. Judge Burris said, Mr. Cameron helps his vocational mentees also with their life skills classes. He helps them to learn how to implement those life skills into their vocational work and with their lives in general. As the saying goes, the best teacher is one who practices what he preaches. Mr. Cameron does. A former student of Chad said, I have witnessed how much he regrets taking another person's life. I believe that is why he's always trying to help younger guys like myself. And a current mentee said of Chad, I'm fully aware that Chad has committed a serious offense, but he also has committed himself to making amends for his mistakes by constantly reforming for betterment since his incarceration. I truly believe he is a much better person than when he entered prison. Members of the board, the state mentioned that we are currently litigating a post-conviction case on behalf of Chad, and that is true. Chad is a client of ours. We are going to litigate zealously for him in each and every forum that is appropriate. We also mentioned that he didn't complete the victims advocacy class. I feel compelled to state that I believe that's our fault. When Chad shared with us that he was engaging, the victim dialogue class. When he was engaging in the victim dialogue class, I think we engaged in conversations with the state about that. And without our understanding that it was supposed to be confidential, I think the breach of confidentiality from our office to the state may have gotten him removed from the class. That is my understanding of that, but I don't want that to be held against Mr. Cameron, who has tried very, very hard to engage in that class because it is something that he enjoys and because of his remorse for the actions that occurred that night. In closing, I believe I've covered everything that I need to cover. In closing, as I was preparing for this hearing, I came across a quote from the Chief Justice John Marshall, who described the act of granting a pardon as an act of grace proceeding from the power entrusted with the execution of laws. I am here today with Mr. Cameron, who is a son, a husband, and a mentor at this facility. And I'm asking for an act of grace from this board today. And I ask that his recommendation for clemency be granted. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Marabella.
Thank you, Madam Cameron. Every time there's a case before us that's a murder, it's a horrible crime. The people that suffer. Your crime, as described by Ms. Marbella, is accurate. Chase this guy out. I know all the facts. I also know that you were 21 years old at the time. And you certainly appear to be a different person today. Now the question was raised, and it's a real question, and that is 21 years. Is 21 years sufficient for a person to be granted some sort of leniency on a murder case? And I think your answer, there's no amount of time that would satisfy. I agree. 21 years is not a long time. That family has suffered for a long time, and they will continue to suffer. What we are here today to determine, at least I feel I am here to determine today, who are you as opposed to that 21-year-old person who committed this horrible crime? And what result is going to happen here today? Regardless of what my vote is, you aren't walking out of here. You have a long road beyond this, even if I vote favorably of this whole board. But I look at what you've accomplished, and I look at what you've done, your prison record, your good disciplinary record, the excellent programs that your trustee status, your reentry mentor, the letters from people such as Judge Buras that point out to you done. You're a low risk. I certainly understand and believe that your remorseful is true. You have a lot of good support from your family, and prison staff suggest the same, and you've got a good transition. Having taken all of those things into account, in spite of the fact that you've only served 21 years, and I recognize 21 years is probably not sufficient. My vote would be to grant, to recommend to the governor that he can use your sentence for 99 years. Immediate parole, that would be good. Only 1 of 5. So it's my vote.
Thank you, sir.
President.
Mr. Cameron, it is a tough case. And sad to say, I've seen stuff like this happen before. Friend gets in a fight, the other friends chase the guy down and they beat him up. The one thing is that you didn't bring the knife to the fight. It was brought by the victim, which he may have thought he was just protecting himself, but I look at this more of a heat of a moment thing. You've done wonderful things in prison. My vote is the same. I vote to grant and commute your sentence to 99 years.
Thank you, sir.
Jackson. Mr. Cameron, my vote is the same for the same. Mr. Roach.
Mr. Cameron, I'm the first one to acknowledge that you've done very well. Including the last write-up was over 10 years ago.
Yes, sir.
You've done marvelous things. But there's 3 reasons a person can incarcerate so that he can be rehabilitated. And I think you've been rehabilitated. Isolation to protect the general public from someone who's done a negative thing, committed a crime. And the third is retribution, punishment for that crime. And I just don't think 21 years of incarceration is sufficient time taking the life of a human being. I don't care who brought the knife to the fight. You left a premises, you ran 2 or 3 blocks in pursuit of someone that you should have just let leave the premises. Based upon law enforcement opposition, based on adamant opposition from the DA's office and insufficient time served, my vote is to deny your request.
Thanks, Mr. Roche. So, Mr. Cameron, I agree with everything. I don't think 21 years is sufficient time. I don't think any amount of time is sufficient. But as has been expressed here, our job is to look at who you are today. And do I believe you're a threat to public safety? I do know. My vote today would be to commute your sentence to 99 years with full eligibility. See, one unfavorable vote, 4 favorable votes will make the recommendation on your behalf, Governor Edwards, that your sentence be commuted.
Thank you, man.
Okay, let's unpack this. Frankly, I was surprised. Now, his sentence has been commuted, which means that the governor still needs to approve it. And I don't know if that's a shoo-in, being that it wasn't unanimous. I think the governor has, I don't know how many he gets, but I think he's declined about 30 or so that have gotten to him. And if this is a political case, as he's kind of, as you saw what's going on with the prosecutor, you just don't know what's going to happen. I found the court hearing, and check it in the description down below, the whole write-up, and it's quite long. It's 16 pages, and it's quite confusing. There's a lot of he said, she said. So it's really quite hard to, but I'll try to unpack a little bit of it. What I have to say is the first mistake, in my opinion, that he made was following his attorney's advice, or however it happened, and taking a non-jury trial. It was a judge, so he had a trial in which a judge would decide his fate. I don't know why anyone would do that, because it's like so much easier to get a jury, I would argue, I would think, to even maybe get away with it. Instead, he got a life sentence, which does seem harsh. You would think that there can be many other sentences other than life. Remember, he would have had no chance of parole until now. It's only because of the law changes that he was allowed to even get parole. Right? This hearing commuted him from a life sentence to 99, which makes him eligible for parole. The governor signs off on it. Then we would have one of those small hearings that we see where they don't talk about the details. And the parole board, unless he has some type of really bad write-up, always will parole him at that point. So yeah, his first mistake was waiving his right to a jury, which he then appealed. And as you see, there's a whole lot of drama with this case, as the DA office said. He was 21. He was in college, although he was on parole at the time, and I couldn't find out for what. So this is no angel. But he was still just 21. he chased a guy out of a bar who had the knife, chased him like 2 to 3 blocks. In the transcript, there's a witness who also was on parole at the time, who wasn't in the bar because he wasn't allowed to be in the bar, who made statements against him because there was a lot of questions. You know, there was a whole group of people, right? So first of all, you'd have to prove which one of that group stabbed him, right? This is why a jury trial probably could have gotten him, raise a lot of doubt, because there was a group of men that chased this guy who had the knife. And there was a lot of finger pointing as to, but he's admitted that he did the stabbing, so that's not in question. At least he's admitted to us, right? It's interesting how that works. Anyways, according to what the judge believed happened, is he chased them. A group of guys chased this person who he thought had stabbed his friend 3 blocks out of the bar. He threw a bottle, or multiple bottles actually hit him. The witnesses said that now the victim was unconscious on the floor. The knife had fallen out of his pocket. He grabbed it. The other person who was on parole came out and yelled at the group. The group left. He remained, stabbed the victim. I think they say maybe 4 times. It's just not clear to me. And then he threw the knife in the dumpster and then told his buddies. And then it took a while for the police to arrest him. I think it took a few days, and that person had called him out of a lineup, and that other witness. You know, they're like, to be in a bar fight situation, the other guy, the guy who died, has the knife. You take it from him and use it on him. I gotta tell you, I'm not for like, if all of us are young and all of us have been in bars, a lot of us have been in bar fights, and there's no reason for anyone to be getting killed, right? Like, bar fights can happen, and it's almost like you know, use your fists if it's gonna happen. And I'm not condoning, like, I'm at such an age I would never, but when you're young, when you're 20, when you're 21, these things happen. And I've personally been at the wrong end of those things. Not that I've started them, but I've been at the wrong end of them. And I woke up in a hospital. I'll just come out with it. I woke up in a hospital, and I didn't even know it hit me. I was attacked. They found me in the street. They thought I was hit by a car. I woke up in the hospital with my parents next to me. They thought, my parents got a phone call from the hospital. They thought I had died. And frankly, I would never forgive anyone for if they had killed me or stabbed me, because I'm just, you know. So I'm a little bit sensitive to the subject because of that, probably. I'll go pick apart some things that his attorneys, I thought they did a bad job. His attorney sitting next to him at one point was like petting his arm. It was a little awkward, in my opinion. I mean, there's a way to tap on an arm, but she was like petting his arm. Then his wife, who came up, who's also an attorney and apparently practices as representative board, she really didn't do an impressive job. I mean, these were the 3 examples that she gave to prop him up, which was, 1, after Katrina, he made them chairs. Okay, I mean, it's nice, but you're in prison. I mean, what else are you gonna do if you have access to make chairs? And I don't even know how that works. How is that legal? Like, how can you make a chair and send it to a family member? Does it work that way? I don't know. And then he helped his roommate with math, and that he's selfless. Those were the 3 items that I got from his his wife / attorney. What was a little awkward. Oh, and then his mom gave 2 stories. One is when he was an 8-year-old boy, when he said something cute. And the other was that on a prom night, instead of hanging out with his friends, he went on a date with a girl. Like, so far we have 5 examples where they're just not impressive at all, right? And then what stuck out to me is what wasn't said, which is near the end when his attorney was talking about him, he all of a sudden brings up 2 sons. And then like pop up in the back there, and you're like, what? Those are his sons? Like, up until this point, we had no idea. Is he the biological father? Is he the father? Because no, his own wife didn't mention he's a good father. If he did, I didn't hear it. Did you? Put it in the comment section. No one mentioned that he was a good father anywhere, even in the closing statements from his attorney. She said he's a good son and he's a good husband. Not that he's a good father. So those are things that stuck out to me as like, I don't know, it could be that he's done some good things in there. Really, I thought the DA actually said the most flattering things about him out of everyone else. The DA said he will get out one day. Not yet. It's not enough time. And he's doing a great job in the prison system mentoring. I mean, sometimes I just shake my head, right? I do come back to the fact that he was 21, that he did serve a long time. He has done great in prison. It was not a first degree thing. He was drunk, he was in the moment, and it was the other guy's knife. But in my eyes, he still, with the group, with the mob mentality, chased down a guy who was alone, beat him unconscious, and then stabbed him to death. And I can't really get over that part. But again, he has served his time. Is it long enough? 21 years? I could have seen why they would have said another 4 years. They could have denied him so that he would have served a 25-year sentence. I could have seen it go that way too. But maybe it was because there was no, I didn't see that person's family come up and speak. I didn't see really anyone other than the DA come up and speak on his behalf, and that probably has a lot to do with it. And it could be they're just not around anymore. The victim was older. He was 27, I think, or 28. Okay, so I really do want your help on this one. I do want to hear your thoughts on this, because I'm like, I could really go both ways. I could have gone with get denied, do more time, get out, kind of like the DA said, probably after the 25 years. The time would have added up for him to reapply, and but I'd love to hear your thoughts so you can help me get through this one. And with that, I'll let you go. Okay, so how do we unpack this? First, I want to say that I did already do this hearing, this commutation hearing. And the reason that I'm bringing it back up is because he had his parole hearing now just a few months later, September, well, more than a few months later, about 9 months later, September 20th. So what I thought I would do is merge the parole hearing at the end of this. So I'm going to do a little bit of unpacking, and then we're going to watch the parole hearing. So maybe you've seen this commutation hearing already. It had about 8,000 views, but you know, his wife, who's sitting in the back there, we've seen her a few times representing other inmates, and she actually said something at a hearing that I thought was a little bizarre. And she said she was representing one of his friends in Angola, and she said to add character, to add that the person she was representing, that he was a good guy. She said, well, my husband introduced me to him, and my husband wouldn't introduce me to anyone unless they were a great guy. And that was part of the attorney's statement, and I just couldn't get over that. I said, really? You're going to tell the board that your husband, who's in prison in Angola for stabbing someone, that's your character witness recommendation? It's like just bizarre to me. Okay, so here's the statements of facts. And you know, on or about July 9th, 1988, the defendant and several other male acquaintances went to bar Traditions on Highland Road in Baton Rouge. A physical altercation took place on the dance floor. Chris Thorne, the victim, began brandishing a knife as he stood on the dance floor. The victim continued to brandish the knife as he walked through the crowd and exited the bar. Several individuals, including the defendant, began chasing the victim after he exited the bar. As the group gave chase, the victim ran out of the parking lot and down the Highland Road to a police station. The group surrounded the victim. At some point, the victim lost possession of the knife and was physically attacked. According to the autopsy report, the victim sustained 4 stab wounds, including a fatal one that severed the abdominal aorta. And you know, it's interesting because I felt that his statement where he took accountability, it was almost like he was blaming the victim. Well, he said that the knife was taken out. He thought that he stabbed his friend. He chased him down. He had, and then what did he say? He threw a beer bottle at him to try to get the knife out. And then he was beating him. And then he saw the knife and he stabbed him. But he stabbed him 4 times. What was his appeal about? Oh, it was that he never made a knowing and intelligent waiver to his right to a trial by jury. Because remember, he did trial by a judge. And it's interesting to remember that Louisiana was one of the only 2 states in the United States at the time that did not require a unanimous jury to get life in prison. You could get a 10-12 or 12-1 jury verdict and still get life in prison. So it wasn't as simple to say, hey, let me get a jury trial. I only need to get 1. You needed to get 3 jurors to find you innocent. The defendant specifically argues that the record shows that rule was only overturned, I think, in 2018 or 2019. It's pretty recent. That has changed. The defendant specifically argues that the record shows that the trial judge at best merely established that the defendant's trial counsel advised him to waive the jury trial. The defendant notes that while the trial judge asked the defendant if he had been advised by counsel to waive jury trial, the trial judge did not ask the defendant if it was his desire to do so. So he's appealing by saying, is this what you want to do? Versus just asking if this is what the attorney advised you to do. And come on, yeah, like it. Also remember the fact that, right, they pointed that out. He's on He's out on bond and he got a DUI. That's just that like, how do you do that? I get that you want to drink, you're under stress, but to get a DUI, that definitely did him no favors. In his second assignment of error for an appeal, the defendant contends that his trial counsel advice to waive his right to a jury trial was based on misinformation. The defendant specifically contends that his trial counsel was led to believe that there would be no eyewitnesses at the trial who could positively identify the defendant as the person who stabbed the victim. So he's like, I didn't know that there would be eyewitnesses. The defendant notes that his trial counsel confirmed that he would not have advised the defendant to waive his rights to jury trial if he had known of the eyewitnesses. How do you not know if there would be eyewitnesses? You would know that. The defendant contends that the misleading discovery response amounted to material misrepresentation of the strength of the state's case. Thus, the defendant contends that his waiver was not knowing and intelligent, as it was based on brief and erroneous advice of his counsel, and there would be no witnesses who could make a positive identification of the defendant. Well, it was denied. The state's discovery response, July 11th, notes that during the questioning by the police, Thompson was shown a photographic lineup consisting of the defendant and 5 other individuals. As stated in the discovery response, Thompson pointed to the picture of the defendant and stated, "This looks like him." As further stated in the discovery response, Thompson was unable to make a positive identification at that time. As correctly emphasized by the state in response brief, this discovery response should have put the defense on notice of a possible in-court identification of the defendant's trial. Thus, the defendant has failed to show that he lulled in misapprehension the strength of the state's case. And that makes a lot of sense. We're like, come on, he knew. He was even identified. But, okay, in short, that's what happened. Now, it's this case, it is interesting. You know, you can see, in some sense, like, you're young, bar fights happen. It was the person who passed away was the one with the knife. But then you go, and I love this assistant DA. She's so great. She shows up and states, he left the dance floor with the knife out, which makes me seem like he was afraid. He was afraid, in fear for his life. He held the knife. He leaves the bar. He's not looking to confront them, and they all chased him. So let's see. There's more here. On the night of the questioning, the defendant, George, did not witness the attack outside the police station. George testified that he left the bar in a vehicle with Frank. He did not recall anyone in the vehicle having said anything about the defendant saying that he jugged anyone. Defense witness Aaron Seal, who also presented the night in question, while Seal was in the parking lot of Traditions, an individual abruptly approached him from behind and knocked him down. Seal and the individual both fell to the ground. The individual got up and ran towards the police station with a group of guys chasing him. A few minutes after the guys ran down the road, Kennebra walked up to Seal in the parking lot. Seal noted that Kennebra, who had a cut near his eye, and Kennebra saw that it was inflicted by a man in the bar. According to Seal, Kinbrew then stated, "We cut him up." Seal did not see Thompson at the bar that night. Okay, here's something interesting. The taped statement of Tiffany O'Neill, who was deceased at the time of the trial, admitted O'Neill had gone to the bar with the victim on the night in question. O'Neill stated that the victim asked for her knife when they arrived at the bar and she gave it to him. So it was her knife. Noting that the victim feared that gang members were in the bar. So the victim went to the bar with a woman with a knife and took it from her in fear. O'Neill observed the confrontation in the bar. She stated that several of the individuals who crowded around the victim had knives. After that statement, O'Neill was asked, "You saw several of them with knives?" She responded, "Yes, sir. I saw one thrown for sure." O'Neill stated that the victim was stabbed while he was in the bar, as far as I knew. When asked whether she saw someone stab the victim in the bar, O'Neill responded negatively and stated that she saw a knife that was thrown at the victim hit him. O'Neill did not know the details of what happened after the victim fled the bar. She noted that individuals were returning to the bar before she could catch up with the victim. The defendant testified that he did not stab the victim or admit that he did so. He also denied hitting the victim. The defendant confirmed that he did chase the victim with the other individuals, noting that he mistakenly believed that the victim had stabbed Vent while in the bar. The defendant testified that he observed the victim lunge toward Vent and that Vent bent over as if he had been stabbed by the victim. So this is what we heard him say, Chad say. After the group chased the victim to the police station, that's the crazy. He was running to a police station. And that just makes it that much more dramatic. He's really running for a police station in fear for his life. And that's when they surrounded him. The defendant observed then and realized that he had not been injured. Someone threw a bottle and it shattered behind the victim's head. The defendant further testified that as the victim dropped the knife, the defendant, pushed the victim through the fence and they both fell to the ground. The defendant stated that he then fled the scene. He confirmed that he and Vent had been friends and added that Vent may have testified against him because he had a female friend who alleged that Vent had sexually assaulted her. This just seems like a great group of people, huh? The defendant also stated that Broad and Vent were friends and that Broad probably testified under Vent's instructions. The defendant did not have an explanation for the testimony of the other witnesses. Thompson's testimony provided a near certain identification of the defendant as the person who stabbed the victim and threw the knife in a trash can. Several witnesses provided details by largely consistent factual accounts that corroborated the defendant's guilt. By his own admission and several witnesses' testimony, the defendant was presented when the victim was fatally attacked. The defendant also admitted to pushing the victim to the ground. Several witnesses have heard the defendant state that he jugged or stabbed the victim. We are convinced that the evidence presented herein negated any responsible probability of misidentification. He lost the appeals. That was a little bit kind of all over the place, but it was also interesting. Mr. Marabella defended one of his co-defendants in court, and I tried finding that transcript or some information on that, but I couldn't find anything. So he had a lot of programs. That's true too. Mr. Freeman granted, Mr. O'Shea didn't because of the not enough time served. But the governor did sign it, and now we're going to go and see his parole hearing.
Chad Cameron, DOC number 459911, first class offender, parole eligibility date 3/24/2023, good time 12/5/2085, full term 6/22/2101, 99-year sentence, second degree murder, signed a commutation of sentence to 99 years on March the 24th, 2023. Does that sound correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, Mr. Cameron, how old are you?
46 years old, sir.
When's your birthday?
May 3rd, 1977, I was born.
Okay. And how many years have you been incarcerated?
Over 21.
Do you have a high school diploma or GED?
I have a high school diploma from Lee High School in Baton Rouge.
Lee High School?
Yes, sir.
And any further education?
Yes, sir. I went to college for 3 years until this happened.
Are you a trustee there?
Yes, sir. I've been a trustee since 2010, 2011, thereabout.
Okay, it looks like you only had 5 disciplinary write-ups in the time you've been in, is that correct?
Yes, sir. 5.
And the last one was in 2011?
Yes, sir.
And what do you currently do at the facility there?
I've been a mentor in the Reentry Program for the last 14 years, teaching guys collision repair technology so they can get a trade and go home and get a job, be employable.
Okay, so you work in the collision repair right now? Is that what you're doing? You
Yes,
work
sir.
with folks?
Is that your work? Is that what you've been doing?
Yes, sir. That's what I've been doing for since 2011.
Okay. What are your plans for you to be released? Where are you gonna go? What you gonna do?
I have a job at first my reentry plan would be going to the pro project for the first 3 weeks to take advantage of classes they offer to help me, reacclimate to society. And now move in with my wife in Baton Rouge and start employment at Jerry Lane, as soon as I can.
All right. How old were you when you committed this crime?
It was in 1998. I just turned 21, sir.
And were you addicted to drugs or alcohol?
Yes, sir. I was drinking heavily at that time.
What about drugs?
Not too often, but I did partake from time to time.
What type of drugs?
I've done marijuana, X pills, and a few like Valium and Xanax and things like that.
Well, tell me a little bit about the crime. Tell me about what happened. I read it. I was, obviously you were at a club. There's some things that went on. I think the crime committed occurred around the precinct. Tell me exactly what happened. Tell me on that time.
Okay, on the night of, July 10th, 1998, me and a few friends went to a bar called Traditions downtown Baton Rouge. After I was there for a few hours, I went by the DJ booth to talk to a friend of mine, and I heard somebody say that somebody was on a dance floor with a knife. And I looked down the dance floor, and that's when I seen Chris, my victim, with a knife in his hand. And he swung the knife at a friend of mine's stomach, and my friend had bent over, and it looked like he had got hit. So I ran down to check on my friend. As I ran down, I seen Chris running towards the rear exit, so I chased him. And I ran around the block down to the precinct, about a block down the road. And when I came around the corner, he was facing me with the knife. And I still had the beer bottle in my hand, so I threw the beer bottle to try to knock the knife out of his hand, but I missed. But that caused him to drop the knife by his side, and I tackled him. And as I was getting off the ground off of him, I seen the knife laying on the ground next to him. And I did the worst thing I could possibly do. I grabbed the knife and I stabbed him. And I'm gonna regret that for the rest of my life and what I've done to Miss Carolyn and her family.
Now, did you know him?
No, sir, I did not.
You just saw him in a fight with a friend, or you thought, and then you just.
Yes, sir. When the guy standing next to him on the dance floor just happened to be a friend of mine, and I thought he stabbed him in his stomach.
And then what happened?
Well, that's when I chased him outside.
Right, I know, but after you stabbed him, then what you left?
Yes, Yes,
Took
sir.
the knife? What exactly happened?
I,
The knife.
I threw the knife in the garbage can on the way running back to the bar. And I went in the bar and they shut the bar down. And shortly after that, I left and went home.
And then they came and found you. You turned yourself in or what?
Yeah, a friend of mine, Frank, the guy that I thought had gotten stabbed, had turned himself in. And his father called my father and I turned myself in.
So what have you been, what kind of classes have you been taking since you've been in? You've been taking any substance abuse, NAA, victim awareness? What are you taking to kind of?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I've taken all those. I've taken thinking for a change, 100 hours, substance. I've taken living life in balance. I've taken anger management. I've taken a Tyro leadership class. I've taken the trauma classes. I've tried to take advantage of all the programming available up here.
Victim awareness, have you taken that class?
I'm currently in victim awareness right now, but I did have the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to meet Miss Thorne and her sister and express to them how terrible I feel for what I've done to her and her family, and answer a lot of questions they had pertaining to that night. And I just hope and pray that our meeting was beneficial to them.
Okay. Warren, you got any input for us?
Like Chad says, he goes back to 2010, back when our reentry stuff pretty much kind of started here. He's been a mentor for this many years, and over the years, he has helped a bunch of guys learn trade, and above a trade, learn the ability to be able to cope with things, to give them more tools in their toolbox, not just to do body and fender, but just about life. He's done a really good job for us.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll hear from Mr. Kerry Meyer.
Good morning, Kerry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. I'll keep this brief because I know there are other people here to speak. We have supported Chad again through this entire process, through his clemency process. One of the reasons we've supported Chad is obviously because of his accomplishments, not only just the accomplishments that show, but the difference that he's made in the lives of people there as a mentor. Chad committed a crime. Chad does not have a criminal mentality. Chad has proven that through his record. He's proven that through the work that he's done, through the programs that he's taken. And we are in full support. We will provide Chad with the services he needs, including social norms and financial skills, consumer skills. We'll assist him through the transition before he actually goes to restart his life completely and start working. We'll give Chad that opportunity through our program to have a proper reentry. And we just ask this board today to grant Chad his parole.
Right, thank you. Let's see, on Chad's side, we have Miss Catherine. Would you like to make a statement? Jack, thanks.
So I'm Mr. Cameron's attorney. I'll be reserving my statement till the
You're
end.
at the end, you'll finish up. Okay, what about Jennifer Cameron?
Yes, sir. My name is Jennifer Cameron. I'm Chad's wife. I don't really know what all to say about him. He's made such a difference, not just in the community here, but in the community at home as well. Even with just my kids, he loves my children like they're his own. We are fully prepared to support Chad completely. He has a home, he has a vehicle, have him home if this board would see fit to grant him today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your comments. All right, now we'll hear from Ms. Carolyn. You'd like to make a statement, Ms. Carolyn?
He's fine. He's fine, Miss Caroline.
for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of my son, Chris Thorne. This is Chris. He was 26 years old when he was murdered on the beginning of July. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous.
Okay.
And he was murdered on July 10th, 1998 by Chad Cameron. We endured 4 years of waiting for a trial while Chad was out free, living a life. I have forgiven him because God tells me in order to be forgiven, you must forgive. This doesn't mean I don't expect a murderer to not have to face the consequences of his actions. Chad was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole or probation. He was found guilty in a court of law. Chad was not the only one sentenced to life that day. Chris's father and I were sentenced to life without our child. Our family was sentenced to life without a grandson, stepbrother, cousin, nephew, and uncle. Found that the hardest part of losing a child is living every day afterwards, realizing the only visits will be at a cemetery, the only conversations will be one-sided, never seeing Chris again or hearing his voice, never feeling that hug, period, I love you, Mom. I've had to live with burying my child, something I wouldn't wish on any parent, and losing my husband due to the stress of missing Chris. There are no words to describe the heartbreak and sadness I feel every day. I don't understand how 20 years is anywhere close to a life sentence. Chad Cameron will get out young enough to have a life. My son will never have that opportunity. I was robbed of sharing my life with Chris. Not only were Chris's hopes and dreams taken away, but mine as well. It breaks my heart when I see friends and family with children and grandchildren. I'm happy for them, but I'm just that happiness they have. All of these happy memories were taken away by Chad Cameron. On the night of July 10th, 1998, Chris had a confrontation with one of Chad's friends on the dance floor of a bar. Chad and his friends saw this and proceeded to chase Chris out the side door and down the street. Chris was running away from them, not fighting. If you knew Chris, you knew he was not a fighter. He was trapped in the corner of a fenced area on the parking lot of a police station. He was beaten by those who chased him. Chris was holding a knife to protect himself and dropped it during the beating. Chad Cameron picked it up and chose to stab Chris 4 times, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. My son later died that night. He was trying to get away and only trying to protect himself. I am here today to tell you that I do not believe 20 years out of a life sentence is enough time for taking the life of my only child, Chris Thorne. I believe that Chad Cameron should go home to his mother when Chris comes home to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. So sorry. Thank you. Lanny Arnold, anything like to make a statement?
My name is Lanny Arnold. Christopher Thorne was my nephew. He was murdered by Chad Cameron on July 10th, 1998. I am here on behalf of my nephew, on behalf of a life he had and a life that Chad Cameron finally took. It took over 3 years to finally take our day in court. Before that day, it was torturous for my sister and my brother-in-law, knowing that Chad Cameron was out on bond living his life while my nephew would never take another breath. But our day had finally arrived. My sister Carolyn and my brother-in-law Kenneth sat through several days of court proceedings. We listened to the horrific details of their child's brutal murder. We listened to the opposing counsel defend Chad Cameron. After all the evidence had been presented and the judge made his ruling, we finally heard life in prison at hard labor without the benefit of parole, probation, or suspension of sentence. We thought the judicial system had done its job. We thought Chris would at least get justice. We thought that we would never have to relive the horror of this heinous crime. After all, the judge said, life in prison without parole. Chad Cameron filed an appeal in district court and was denied. He filed an appeal with the Supreme Court and was denied even hearing the case. Yet here we are today, having to relive what should have been settled over 20 years ago. Chad Cameron took my sister's only biological child's life. Chad was chased down the street, cornered in a fenced-in area on a police substation. Chad and his friends brutally beat him unconscious. They took turns beating him with beer bottles and punching and kicking him. Chris was unconscious and was down and no threat to anyone. But that wasn't good enough. Mr. Cameron made a conscious decision to pick up a knife and go back and stab Chris 4 times. One fatal stab to the abdominal aorta. Then Chad Cameron left him to die and returned to party as if nothing had happened. Chad Cameron not only took Chris's life, but he took the hopes and dreams away from his parents. Chad Cameron took one life but devastated many lives. This entire process has caused great grief to my sister. We were unable to attend the first hearing as Carolyn, for number one, didn't think her health would allow her. She's been in and out of the hospital every time we have one of these issues come up. Her stepson had also had a stroke and ultimately died. She thought seeing Chad Cameron was more than she could handle at the time. But she knew we had to face this head on in order to give Chris a voice. There is not a day that goes by that my sister does not think about her child and the future he could have had. I understand that Chad Cameron has been a model prisoner and wants a second chance at life. I do understand that. But when does Chris get a second chance at life? We put our trust in the judicial system, and we trust that that same system that put him in prison will do the right thing and keep him there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. All right, Ms. Tracy Barbera, would you like to make a statement?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Kelsey. Good morning, Mr. Marabella, Mr. Freeman. I do recall the pardon hearing back on December 12th and many of the comments that were made by Mr. Freeman and Mr. Marabella. And this is very difficult for Chris's family to deal with. And I know the members of the board do understand how the family is feeling. The difficulty here is that it's been such a short period of time. The board recommended commutation December 12th. The governor granted it March 24th, and here we are September 20th. So this family has really only been dealing with the possibility of this man who received a life sentence for killing Chris could be released back to the streets. And do I believe that Chad Cameron will spend a lot more time in prison? No, I don't. But I would ask that the members of the board please give this family more time to deal with his potential release. If we had negotiated a plea to manslaughter in this case with a 40-year sentence, his parole eligibility would have been after 85%. Of course, then I realized Act 22 was passed, and so his eligibility would be even sooner than that. But the bottom line is he has served less time in prison than Chris was alive. So I would ask you to please take those things into consideration and balance them with the good things that Chad Cameron has done in prison. And please, if you're inclined to grant parole, please wait. Please let him serve some more time for this family to deal with. But again, we do stand with the family in opposition to his release. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. All right, Chad, would you like to make a statement on your behalf?
Oh, yes, sir. I would first like to thank the board for this opportunity. I would also like to thank my supporters here at headquarters and on Zoom. I would give anything in this world to be able to go back to that night and fix what I have done. My heart breaks when I think about all the hurt and pain that my actions have caused Miss Carolyn and her family these past 25 years. Meeting Miss Carolyn was the hardest thing that I've ever done. How could I possibly sit across from Chris's mother? I asked myself that a million times leading up to it. I practically cried the whole time because I was so nervous and overcome with guilt. I made a promise that day that if I am released, I would do good things with my life and make sure that others benefit from my story. I absolutely plan on keeping that promise if granted here today. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
All right, thank you. Ms. Catherine, would you like to wrap it up?
I would, thank you. Members of the board, I know that we appeared before you in December to discuss clemency for Mr. Cameron. Since that time, he's received 18 new certificates. He has taken advantage of the programming afforded to him by this facility. And I think that it's been summed up by people much better than me that Mr. Cameron is dedicated to the idea of rehabilitation. Judge Buras said in one of the 42 letters written in support of his release that it's his pleasure to write this letter on behalf of Chad Cameron to show appreciation for his tireless work and to say with certainty that he's a wonderful man and would be a wonderful citizen. Mr. Cameron has spent the past 22 years of his life becoming a different person from the man that he was in July of 1998. And I like to think, members of the board, that the idea of parole is the idea that we can become better than the worst moments in our life, that we can be dedicated to the idea of rehabilitation. Chad Cameron has done that. He has received 100 certificates. He, even in the short period of time that he has remained here with the idea that he may be paroled out, he has continued to dedicate himself to the idea that rehabilitation is better. Chad will spend the rest of his life remorseful for the choices that he has made and the decisions that he took that led him to take Mr. Thorne's life. And he has expressed his sincere remorse. But he has outlined a plan for being a contributing citizen of this society, and we ask members of the board that you grant his release.
All right, thank you. All right, now prepare to vote. All right. Mr. Cameron, the difficult case. I'd like to thank the family of victims for being here and for talking for your son. I know this has been a terrible, terrible situation. I know that, you know, you're right. You have a sentence back years and years ago, and you think, well, it's one way, and look, the laws changed. That would be easier on us if sometimes laws didn't change, but they change. And our charge, our responsibility is to not retry the case, but make a decision based on what the man has done and the years he's been in. I understand Mr. Barbera's point, and I take that all into consideration. Mr. Cameron, it was a terrible crime. It's a terrible crime. You're right. You're never going to be able to take away what you did. But I have to look at what you've done for the last 20 years, what the warden said, what your programs you've taken, your risk probability is low. You know, again, these cases are never easy for us. They're never easy for me. Speak for me. They're never easy for me. But again, based on all the information I have, based on the warden's comments, your institutional record, your low risk score, your plan, My vote would be to grant your parole today to the Louisiana Parole Project. Have no contact with the victim's family. NAAA 2 times a week. Do community service 6 hours per month. And maintain full-time employment. Just one vote. That's me. That's my vote. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Cameron, I do agree with the chairman that you definitely have done everything you're supposed to do in prison. You've done great. You've done everything that could be expected of you. But on the other side, it's a murder charge. In 21 years, to me, is insufficient time at this time. I do think you'll get out. I will tell the family, I think eventually he will make parole. But today I am going to vote to deny.
All right. Mr. Marabella.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank everyone who came here today. We have heard you, and we do appreciate the courage that it takes to be here. Our role is to determine not necessarily what happened or why it happened, but who this person is today. The facts of the case are something that we do take into account. There's no question. I do understand Ms. Barbera's comments as well. I think that based upon my responsibility, what I believe my job is today, I have to agree with our chairman today that he's got a very good prison record. He's done community service work. He's got an excellent transition plan, low risk. He was 21 years old at the time. My vote today likewise would be to grant with the same.
Wow. So, the first thing that I'm surprised about is Mr. Freeman, who granted in the commutation hearing, denied in the parole hearing. And I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure why, because, you might think, well, he granted the commutation, but maybe the governor would take time to approve it, and it would take time to get his parole hearing. But I don't think he could have thought that, because the governor, everyone knew he was going to be leaving office. He's done his full term. So if the governor is going to sign commutations, they do it typically. If they're ever going to do it, they do it especially at the end of their term. And so how do you vote for the commutation and then not the parole at this time? I'm a little confused about that. That I can recall, we've only seen one parole hearing that was granted after commutation. And, think about why. The commutation board is nominated by the governor. So if as a commutation board, you say, hey, governor, we're making a recommendation that you commute the sentence. And he says, oh, okay, well, you all made a recommendation here. I'm going to sign it. And then at the parole hearing, the same commutation board says, no, we're not. It just doesn't make sense. So I don't understand why how he could flip-flop like that. Is it really that the DA's statement, which I say this all the time, I think she is my favorite assistant DA that we see, and she stands up for the victim. She speaks passionately, but in this case, I think she understood she wasn't there just to talk a big talk. She was there to ask for what she thought she could reasonably maybe get in return, which was, hey, just don't parole him now. And I'm not sure, could they have said, we will parole him in a certain amount of years? I don't think they could have said that. Either it was going to be deny or grant. And I guess they could have denied and said, hey, you'll get up for parole in X number of 2 more, apply again. maybe they could have sent him to a Steve Hoyle program for, so it would buy the family 9 months. They could have done that. You tell me. What's interesting about this case is that he really has done, I think, everything that you could do. And, if you've seen enough of these hearings, it's not something we should take for granted. There are so many inmates that don't go all out and do everything they can to improve. And then there are these simple aspects that, again, wasn't that long time ago. And as this assistant DA pointed out, Tracy Balboa, that he spent less time in prison than even his victim had lived. And the family is there. It's just destroyed them. Her only biological child taken. And I've been at the wrong end of a bar fight. It was a nightclub. This was a long time ago. A very long time ago. And I didn't know, but I must have done something wrong. I had no idea. I didn't know I was in trouble or I was in a great place. I was in a great mood. I was attacked and hit in the back of the head. I woke up in a hospital with my parents next to me because they got a call and they thought it was happened when I left the club. I was in the middle of the street. They found me. They thought I was hit by a car. My poor parents thought that I was when they got the call from, I think it was the police. And man, it's and I could have definitely something worse could have happened to me. Who knows? I'm lucky, but I would argue minimum of 25 years, or at least have given the family a little bit more time because it did happen so quickly. I wonder, he's married to the attorney in the back there. I wonder, it's going to be interesting, but I have a feeling that we're going to see more of him, not in a bad way, a sense that he's going to come back on a revocation, but he's going to show up for some of his friends. We've seen people. It's like a clique. It's like a little network. You'll start to recognize them as friends, and they show up to their other friends' hearings. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing him showing up to his friends' commutation hearings in support. But you tell me how you feel about this. It's not the worst. We've seen so many that are just terrible homicide, and it's a little different because it's a bar fight, and although when you hear the victims talk about it, it does paint a very strong different picture. But yeah, you tell me. With that, I'll let you go.